Welcome to the session on subcortical gray matter. Specific learning objectives of this session are to learn the structure, function, and connections of the following: the basal ganglia, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the limbic system. The subcortical gray matter. Now, as you all know, now in this brain, it says the cerebrum. You have the outer cortex, which is grid, which is the gray matter, and an inner core of white matter. Right. In the spinal cord, you have an inner gray matter and an outer white matter. Now, in the cerebrum, within the central white core, you have certain masses of gray matter which lie below the cortex. They are hence called the subcortical gray matter, and they include the basal ganglia, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the limbic system. So first, the basal ganglia. So as we just said, these are large masses of gray matter in the white core of the cerebrum. And the basic functions of the basal ganglia are they help in planning and programming motor activity. That is, how rapid a movement should be and how large a movement should be. And they also help in decreasing the muscle tone and inhibit unwanted muscular activity. It's also associated with automated associate movements. That is, when you walk, your hands automatically they move beside you. So that is an associated movement with walking. And it also controls reflexes and muscular activities. And it is certainly concerned with your posture as well. So coming to the basal ganglia, anatomically the basal ganglia includes the corpus striatum, the claustrum, and the amygdaloid body, whereas functionally the basal ganglia also includes the substantia nigra and the subthalamus. The corpus striatum is located on either sides of the thalamus. So here this is the thalamus in the middle, and you have the corpus striatum and either sides of it. The corpus striatum has two parts. It has a caudate nucleus, which is the C-shaped nucleus here is what is called the caudate nucleus, and this lens-shaped nucleus here is what is called the lentiform nucleus. Now this lentiform nucleus is further divided into putamen and a globus pallidum. So here this is a cross section of a frontal section of the brain, wherein this is the caudate nucleus, and this is the caudate nucleus here, and this is the putamen, the inner globus pallidum and the outer putamen, which together make up the lentiform nucleus. The caudate nucleus has a head, it has body, and so this is the head, this is the body, and this is the tail of the caudate nucleus. And if you observe, it is closely related to the ventricles. This is the anterior horn of the lateral ventricle, this is the central part of the lateral ventricle, this is the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle, and this is the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. Now the head of the caudate nucleus, it forms both the lateral wall as well as the floor of the anterior horn of the lateral ventricle. Whereas the body of the caudate nucleus forms the floor of the central part of the lateral ventricle, whereas the tail of the caudate nucleus forms the roof of the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. Now the lentiform nucleus, as we just said, it has two parts: the inner part, which is the globus pallidum, and an outer part which is called the putamen. Now the outer part is made up of densely packed small cells, whereas the inner part is made up of large motor cells, and this is further divided by an external medullary lamina and an internal medullary lamina. Now coming to the surface, the lentiform nucleus has a lateral surface, a medial surface, and an inferior surface. Now this is the lentiform nucleus. Now this is the external medullary lamina. This external medullary lamina divides the lentiform nucleus and into an outer part which is called the putamen and an inner part which is called the globus pallidum. And this globus pallidum is further divided into two parts by an internal medullary lamina. And this part here is what is called the internal capsule. This internal capsule, which is and medial to the internal capsule, this is the thalamus. Here what you can observe is the caudate nucleus, and this part here which you can see is the claustrum, which is again a part of the basal ganglia, and the part which you observe between the claustrum and the putamen is what is called the external capsule. Appears more it is more paler in appearance than the putamen. Coming to the connections, you have afferent connections as well as afferent connections. The afferent connections to the corpus striatum are from the cortex, from the thalamus, and from the substantia nigra. So from the cortex, the connection here, the afferent connection here is called the corticostriate fibers, and from the thalamus, especially the mediodorsal nucleus and the midline nucleus of the thalamus, from there you have afferents coming to the corpus striatum, and from the substantia nigra you have afferents also coming to the putamen. Now coming to the efferent connections, now from most of the efferent connections fibers from the putamen, they go to the globus pallidum, and then apart from this, you have the efferents are the thalamic fasciculus, the subthalamic fasciculus, and you have the pallidonigral pathway. The thalamic fasciculus are of two types, ansa lenticularis and fasciculus lenticularis. The word ansa means loop. Now the fascicularis now this is the caudate nucleus, this is the thalamus, and this is the globus pallidum and the putamen. Now the internal capsule, it lies between the caudate nucleus and thalamus on the one side and the lentiform nucleus on the other side, that is laterally. Now the fasciculus lenticularis, it traverses through the internal capsule and reaches the thalamus, especially the ventrolateral and ventral anterior nucleus of the thalamus, whereas the ansa lenticularis, it loops around the internal capsule and then it reaches the ventrolateral and ventroanterior nucleus of the thalamus. Apart from this, there is the subthalamic fibers which reach from the globus pallidum, they reach the subthalamic nucleus, and the pallidonigral pathway is the efferent fibers which take origin from the globus pallidum to the substantia nigra, and hence the name. Now disorders of the basal ganglia. Usually they result in unwanted involuntary movements and which cause disturbances in muscle tone. A very important presentation of this disorder is a disease called Parkinsonism. Parkinsonism is typically characterized by a triad of tremors, rigidity, and akinesia, meaning lack of movement. Now what happens is a chemical substance called dopamine is secreted from the substantia nigra, and through the nigrostriatal pathway it reaches the corpus striatum. Now this dopamine is responsible for inhibiting the unwanted movement. So if dopamine is deficient in nature, it results in tremors, rigidity, and akinesia. And apart from that, there is some condition called balismus. You've heard about ballistic missiles, right? How do these ballistic missiles fly? They just have a flinging movement, right? So similarly, you have something called balismus, which is nothing but contralateral flinging movements in one or both extremities. The limb suddenly flies about in all directions out of control. Next, coming to the diencephalon. Now, thalamus. Before going into thalamus, we need to know something about the diencephalon. The diencephalon is divided into two parts, the pars dorsalis and the pars ventralis, by a sulcus which is called the hypothalamic sulcus, which extends from the interventricular foramen to the cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius. The pars dorsalis includes the thalamus, the epithalamus and the metathalamus, whereas the pars ventralis includes the subthalamus and the hypothalamus. So now we would go into the thalamus is located on either sides of the third ventricle. The thalamic nuclei. The thalamus is divided by an internal medullary lamina into an anterior part, a medial part and a lateral part. The anterior part has a nucleus which is called the anterior nucleus, and this is the anterior nucleus, and the medial part has a nucleus called the medial dorsal nucleus and a medial ventral nucleus. The lateral part is further divided into a dorsal tire and a ventral tire. The dorsal tire nuclei include the lateral dorsal, the lateral posterior and the pulvinar nucleus. And the ventral tire nucleus include the ventral anterior, the ventral intermediate and the ventral posterior. This ventral posterior is further divided into ventral posterolateral nucleus and ventroposteromedial nucleus. There are certain other thalamic nucleus as well, an intralaminar nucleus which is otherwise also called a centromedian nucleus, and a midline or a paraventricular nucleus, a reticular nucleus, and medial and lateral geniculate bodies. This is again a pictorial representation of the different nuclei. Coming to the functional classification of these nuclei. Now these nuclei are classified as specific, non-specific and reticular. The specific nuclei include the ventral posterolateral nucleus, ventral posteromedial nucleus, ventral anterior nucleus, ventral intermediate nucleus, the medial geniculate body and the lateral geniculate body. And the ascending tracts, they give their inputs into these specific nuclei which further project into the primary cortical areas. The non-specific nuclei include the anterior nucleus, the medial dorsal nucleus, the lateral dorsal nucleus, the lateral posterior nucleus and the pulvinar nucleus. Now these nuclei, they receive inputs from the diencephalic nucleus and they project into cortical association areas in the frontal and the parietal lobe. And lastly, you have the reticular nuclei, which includes the reticular nucleus and the intralaminar nucleus, which have connections with the hypothalamus. The thalamus. Now coming to the metathalamus. The metathalamus includes the lateral and the medial geniculate bodies. Location. Now these are small rounded elevations on the inferior aspect of the posterior part of the thalamus, just lateral to the midbrain. So here what you get, this is the thalamus. So it's a rounded elevation this on the inferior aspect of the thalamus. So this is the medial geniculate body and lateral to that is the lateral geniculate nucleus. Now the lateral geniculate body is connected to the superior colliculus through the superior brachium. And the inferior and the medial geniculate body is connected to the inferior colliculus. So this is the superior colliculus and this is the inferior colliculus. So the medial geniculate body is connected to the inferior colliculus through the inferior brachium. Now what is the basic function here? They are relay stations for the medial and the lateral geniculate body are relay stations for auditory and visual pathways. The medial being for hearing and the lateral geniculate body being for visual. L for light, L for lateral. Okay, this is a simple way by which you can. Now, the lateral geniculate body is located at the terminal end of the optic. They receive their efferents from the temporal half of the retina and they enter the optic tract of the same side. Whereas from the nasal half of each retina, the fibers enter the optic tract of the opposite side after crossing the optic chiasma. The efferents from here are the geniculocalcarine fibers which project as optic radiations into the visual cortex of the occipital lobe, area number 17, 18 and 19. Here they reach the medial geniculate body. Now from the medial geniculate body they project into the auditory cortex. So these are called the cortical fibers and they project into as auditory radiation into the primary auditory area in temporal lobe area number 41 and 42. To the boundaries, the anteriorly, now this line here is what is called the lamina terminalis, which extends from the anterior commissure to the optic chiasma. So anteriorly you have the lamina terminalis, and inferiorly this is the floor of the third ventricle, right? And posteriorly you also have the subthalamus. Again, this is a section, a coronal section of the brain. Now this is the third ventricle here, this is the thalamus, and this is here the hypothalamus. So, and this is the caudate nucleus, this is the lentiform nucleus, and between this structure here is the internal capsule. So the hypothalamus is situated below the thalamus, so superiorly is the thalamus, and laterally you have the internal capsule here, and medially is the third ventricle. Now coming to the subdivisions of the hypothalamus has two halves it is made in two halves by the cavity of the third ventricle. There is a cavity in the middle, right? So you have this hypothalamus has two halves. Now each half of the thalamus is divided into a medial and lateral zones by the anterior column of the fornix, right? And this medial zone is in turn further divided into a periventricular zone and an intermediate zone. Coming to the different regions of the hypothalamus, from anterior to posterior, the hypothalamus is divided into four regions: the preoptic region, the supraoptic region, the mammillary region, and the tuberal region. Now this is the optic chiasma, this is the mammillary body here, and this is the anterior commissure, and this is the lamina terminalis between the anterior commissure and the optic chiasma. So preoptic region is the region adjoining the lamina terminalis. Supraoptic meaning just above the optic chiasma. Mammillary meaning just around the mammillary region. And then you have something called the tuberal region. Now this includes the tuber cinerum, infundibulum, and the region around it. Tuber cinerum is the region between the optic chiasma and the mammillary body. So the region bounded caudally by the mammillary body and anteriorly or rostrally by the optic chiasma. So this is the optic chiasma, this is the mammillary body. So this region here is what is called the tuber cinerum. And then you have the infundibulum. Infundibulum is nothing but a stalk. It connects the posterior lobe of the pituitary with the tuber cinerum. And the tuber cinerum around the base of the infundibulum is elevated to form the median eminence. Again, even the hypothalamus has a number of nuclei. In the preoptic region, you have the preoptic nuclei. Then the supraoptic region consists of the supraoptic nucleus, the anterior nucleus, and the paraventricular nucleus. The tuberal nucleus includes the infundibular nucleus, which is otherwise also called the arcuate nucleus, the ventromedial nucleus, and the dorsomedial nucleus. The mammillary body includes the posterior nucleus and the mammillary nucleus. And regarding the connections, you have afferent connections as well as efferent connections. The afferent connections to the hypothalamus are from the hippocampus to the mammillary body. Mammillary body is a part of hypothalamus. Then striate terminalis, it's a pathway from the amygdaloid body to the preoptic and anterior hypothalamic nucleus. The mammillary peduncle connects the spinal cord and brainstem to the lateral hypothalamic nucleus. The medial forebrain bundle, which connects the autonomic and limbic system of the forebrain to the hypothalamus, and the thalamo-hypothalamic, is a connection between the thalamus and the hypothalamus. The palidohypothalamic is between the globus pallidum and the hypothalamus. The subthalamo-hypothalamic between the subthalamus and the hypothalamus. And apart from this, you have direct physical and chemical receptors in the hypothalamus which detect changes in the temperature, the changes in the pressure in the blood, and immediately send signals. The efferent connections being the connection which is called the mammillothalamic fibers, which is the connection between the mammillary body to the anterior nucleus of the thalamus. The mammillategmental, which is the connection between the mammillary body to the reticular formation of the brain. And then you have the descending fibers to the brainstem and spinal cord, which influence the autonomic nervous system. So even the hypothalamus, it controls both the secretions in the neurohypophysis and the adenohypophysis of the pituitary. We'll see how this happens. Now, the supraoptic and paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus, they secrete the vasopressin and the oxytocin. Now from there, the axoplasmic flow, these fibers, they go to the posterior pituitary, and what happens is there the neurosecretory axons terminate as small expansions over the capillary blood vessels. So this is how secretions from the hypothalamus are brought to the posterior lobe of the pituitary. Next, you have the adenohypophysis. You have a tract which is called the tuberoinfundibular tract. Here what happens is the tuberal and the infundibular nuclei, they produce substances which are called the release inhibiting and release which produce releasing hormones and release inhibiting hormones. Now these are transported to the median eminence by the tuberoinfundibular tract, and from there the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system brings it to the anterior lobe of the pituitary, where these hormones help in the release of ACTH, LH, growth hormone as FSH, and whereas they inhibit the secretion of MSH, that is melanocyte stimulating hormone, and luteotrophic hormone. Lastly, coming to the limbic system. The word limbus means ring. So what this means is, now this is a part, the limbic system includes part of cortical and subcortical structures which form a ring around the upper end of the brainstem. Now this is the brainstem, which includes the midbrain pons and the medulla. So this forms a ring on top of it. What is the basic function of this limbic system? When your olfactory receptors are stimulated, they transmit impulses to your brain. Now this pathway is directly connected to your limbic system. For example, sometimes whenever you smell something, it immediately reminds you of an incident in the past, right? Now this is actually because of the limbic system. So basically what it does is the emotional aspects of the behavior together with the visceral responses accompanying these emotions are controlled by the system, and hence it's called the visceral brain. It is also concerned with recent memory and the integration of olfactory, visceral and somatic impulses reaching the brain. Components of the limbic system. The limbic system has cortical as structures and subcortical nuclei. The cortical structures include the limbic lobe and the hippocampal formation. The limbic lobe is made up of or includes the cingulate gyrus, the isthmus, the parahippocampal gyrus and the isthmus. So this is the isthmus here, this is the cingulate gyrus, this is the parahippocampal gyrus here, and this hook-like structure here is what is called the uncus. The hippocampal formation, it includes the hippocampus. So this is the hippocampus here, and then it also includes the dentate gyrus, the gyrus fasciolaris and the indicium gracium. So these structures shaded in violet. So the hippocampus is an area of the cerebral cortex which is rolled in the inferior horn of the lateral. And hence, so this is a coronal section. So again, this part here which is rolled up in the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle is what is called the hippocampus. And the word hippocampus means seahorse. So this rolling up resembles a seahorse, and hence it derives its name from that. And then it is also called pes hippocampi because this also resembles the claw of cat. Okay, and hence it's called pes hippocampi. Now phylogenetically, it represents archicortex. Archicortex is the oldest existing cortex phylogenetically, and it consists of three layers: a superficial molecular layer, a middle pyramidal layer and a deep polymorphic layer. Then coming to the subcortical nuclei, these subcortical nuclei include the amygdaloid body, the septal region, the olfactory areas, the hypothalamus, basically the mammillary bodies in it, and the anterior nucleus of the hypothalamus. Connections of the limbic system. Now please note that you have a structure here which is called the amygdaloid body. This amygdaloid body is basically concerned with sexual stimulus which are linked to the sense of smell. And also, whenever this amygdaloid body is damaged, what happens is there is less of fear and increased inhibition to decreased inhibition to sexual activity. Now, this amygdaloid body receives its efferents from the olfactory bulb, afferents. And what happens is the efferents from the amygdaloid body, they come out as the stria terminalis, and they reach the level of the anterior commissure, from where they end in the septal region and in the anterior portion of the hypothalamus. And through the anterior commissure, they also go to the opposite amygdaloid body. Next, coming to the Pappas circuit. This is again another connection. Now, the hippocampus, what it does is it correlates recent memory with pre-existing memory, and such that the conceived facts are stored in the cerebral cortex as memory. So whenever the hippocampus is damaged, for example, in an accident, what happens is the immediate events which lead to the accident are often lost in memory. However, the old time memory is retained, and especially memory which are linked to the emotional aspects are lost. So coming now, this is a circuit which helps the correlating the recent memory with the older ones. Now what happens is the hippocampus, through the fornix, it communicates or projects into the mammillary body, and from the mammillary body there are projections into the anterior nucleus of the thalamus, from where it reaches the cingulate gyrus, the entorhinal cortex, and thereby again into the hippocampal formation. So this circuit is what is called the Pappas circuit. Thank you all. So this was the end of the session. So have a good day.